There is a dangerous fairy tale we tell ourselves. We believe that if a country discovers massive oil reserves or a mountain of gold, it will become powerful and happy forever. We think wealth is something you find, not something you create, but history tells a different story. In the 16th century, Spain won the biggest lottery in human history. They discovered the Americas. They found mountains made of solid silver and rivers flowing with gold. They became the masters of the world overnight. But less than 100 years later, the Spanish Empire was bankrupt. Their factories were empty. Their people were starving. And their king was defaulting on his loans. How is this possible? How can the richest country on earth run out of money? This is the story of the Spanish Empire. And it reveals a hidden economic law called the resource curse. It explains why winning the lottery is often a death sentence for nations. To understand this tragedy, you have to go to the Andes Mountains. In the year 1545, a native man stumbled upon a mountain called Cerro Rico, the Rich Mountain. It was the largest deposit of silver ever found on Earth. The Spanish built the city of Potosi right next to it. For the next 2 centuries, 60% of all the silver in the world came from this one mountain. Every year, massive fleets of Spanish galleons sailed across the Atlantic, so heavy with silver they could barely float. When they arrived in Seville, the King of Spain, Philip II, thought he was invincible. He built massive palaces. He built the invincible Armada. He waged wars against the Dutch, the English, the French, and the Ottomans simultaneously. While the king was spending money, a deadly psychological shift was happening to the Spanish people. Because there was so much easy money, nobody saw the point in working anymore. Why build a factory or farm the land when you can just be a conqueror? The culture shifted from production to consumption. Being a merchant or a farmer was looked down upon. Everyone wanted to be a hidalgo, a nobleman who lives off rents and war. And this is where the economic disaster began. Since Spain wasn't producing anything, they had to import everything. They bought their clothes from the Netherlands. They bought their weapons from England. Here is the tragic irony. Spain was at war with England and the Netherlands. But they were using Spanish silver to buy the weapons from the Dutch and the English to fight them. Essentially, Spain was funding its own enemies. The gold didn't stay in Spain. It flowed right through it like water through a funnel. It touched Spanish hands for a second and then went straight to the banks of London and Amsterdam to pay for goods. But the real killer was inflation. We call this the price revolution. Because there was so much silver chasing so few goods, prices in Spain skyrocketed. A loaf of bread in Spain cost 5 times more than in France. This meant that Spanish products became too expensive to export. The few factories that Spain still had went bankrupt because they couldn't compete. The economy was completely hollowed out. It was just a shell filled with gold but empty of real value. King Philip II was the most powerful man on earth, but he was spending more than he earned. He borrowed huge sums from bankers, promising to pay them back with the next treasure fleet. But sometimes the fleet was sunk by storms or pirates. In 1557, the unthinkable happened. King Philip declared bankruptcy. The richest man in the world told his bankers, "I cannot pay." And he didn't do it just once. Spain went bankrupt 4 times in 40 years. It was a financial clown show. By the 1700s, Spain was a second-rate power. They had dug up all the gold in the Americas and they had nothing to show for it. Meanwhile, countries with no gold like England and Holland became the masters of the world. Why? Because they didn't have free money. They had to work, they had to invent, they had to build industries. They learned that true wealth is not gold. True wealth is production. Gold is just a metal, it is a symbol. If you have the symbol but not the productive capacity, you are just hallucinating. We see this same pattern today. Economists call it the Dutch disease. Look at countries with massive oil reserves like Venezuela. They should be rich, but they are often plagued by inflation and poverty because they stop producing everything else. Spain was the first victim of this curse. They thought they were blessed by God, but the mountain of silver was actually a trap. It taught them that wealth is found, but the hidden logic of history is that wealth is created. In our next video, we are going to look at the country that picked up the pieces of the Spanish Empire. A small island that had no gold mines, but had a genius for trade. They turned trade itself into a weapon and drugged an entire nation to balance their books. Get ready for the British Empire. Subscribe to Hidden Logic. The class is in session. See you in the next one.